You've reached Monster 911, and I'm Lance Hightower. I've been taking cryptid emergency calls for over 5 years. If you have a cryptid emergency, please call our toll-free number, 866-306-8085. I can help you. What's your emergency? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another show series. This is going to be a really unique and somewhat of an insider encounter story by this next guest. I'm Lance Hightower, and I'll be your show host to Monster 911. This guest had been in law enforcement and was incredibly detailed as to what happened to him and his dad. And the events that later unfolded will make you definitely think twice about sharing your encounter with any law enforcement officers or the like. And if you've experienced something that frightened you and you've been puzzled and just really trying to understand what it was you saw, call me. Call me 24/7 anytime at 1-866-306-8085. I'll personally return your call, and all names will be kept confidential. And guys, there are parts of this story here that are a bit graphic and definitely terrifying, and these are not really suitable for young ears, so please use some discretion here, parents. So let's listen in to what this guest revealed to me during one of the most intriguing and riveting interviews that I've done in a while. And boy, did I learn a bit from this one, guys.
A little bit of background about myself. I'm only 37 years old, which I don't know. Most people tell me because of my age, people ain't going to believe what I'm saying. But, you know, I don't care if people believe it or not. It happened. When I was born in 1983, and my dad, before I was born, he was already into the Bigfoot phenomenon. He had seen the legend of Boggy Creek, and he had wanted to watch everything he could about these. I watched Legend of Boggy Creek with my dad the first time at 7 years old, which my mom really did not like him showing that movie to a 7-year-old. She thought it was a horror movie. So I knew what a Bigfoot was because growing up, my dad had kept me in it with him, and I was interested and ensconced in the whole, you know, wanting to know what they were, wanting to know where they were at, you know, watching everything I could find on them. And in those days, there was no internet. Well, in 2005... I went through police academy in Texas and got licensed to be a peace officer. And after that is when one of the areas I worked is where I had my first encounter actually seeing one. But before we get into that, I can't work anymore. In 2016, I completely lost vision in one eye. I went completely blind. We had to remove the eye.
Oh, man.
And then my other eye is so bad that unless it's right up in my face or a certain distance out from me, I cannot see it.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, I'm considered legally blind on the right side.
Oh,
and on the left side, well, thank you, sir. And I'm on disability now because of it. I cannot work. They won't let me work.
Okay.
And I'm sure you said you have a brother in law enforcement, so you understand someone in law enforcement being that bad off would be more of a liability than an asset.
Yeah. If he had that same impairment, there's no way he could work.
And it bothers me that I'm only 37 years old and I have to be on disability, but there's no getting around it. It's my own fault. I was diabetic and I did not take care of myself. I was young and stupid and thought that I would live forever. And I'm learning now that I probably won't.
Well, but I'm glad you're with us now, and that we can only take now and move on, right?
Exactly. And see, it was in 2017, right after I'd filed for disability, when I got a phone back after getting my disability check, I was watching YouTube and I stumbled onto one of your shows, and I've been watching y'all ever since.
Okay.
Or listening to your shows.
Well, thank you very much.
And I had a friend who used to tell me, hey, you need to call them and tell them about your encounters, because she would listen with me and she's like, but not all Bigfoot encounters are violent, because some of mine were not violent.
Okay.
And she's like, not all of them are not violent, and they need to know this. And I'm like, no, they're not interested in the fact that they're not violent. They know that not all of them are violent.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, she was with me on 3 of my Bigfoot encounters. I will not give her name because she and I don't speak no more.
Okay.
But so in 2005, after I'd graduated police academy, I found it harder, and I live in southern Oklahoma. Do you know where Marshall County, Oklahoma is at?
I do.
Okay, I live in Marshall County. I can walk out right now, and technically I live in a travel trailer on the backside of my mom's land, behind my mom's house, because being as bad off as I am, they tell me I should not live alone. So my mom lives in the big house, and I live in a travel trailer behind her house.
Okay.
Not a problem. It's a nice place for me to stay. You know, I'm taken care of. And
oh, yeah.
I can walk out my mom's front door, and it is 1/8 of a mile from my mom's front door to Lake Texoma.
Oh, wow.
So, but where this all happened at is not Marshall County. It happened in, I believe they call it Love County.
I know exactly where that county's at. Yes, sir.
Okay. In 2005, after I graduated police academy and got my police officer license, it was a Texas police academy, so I had a Texas license.
Okay.
I was having trouble finding work, and the main reason for that is I did not have a college degree. All I had was my police officer license. And as you well know, most places, they want you to have at least a college degree or some experience before they'll hire you on as a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I was having trouble finding work. Well, a buddy of mine had went to work for the Chickasaw Nation at one of the casinos. And it was Windstar Casino. And I went to work for Windstar Casino. And one of the Indian police officers, a light horse deputy, was telling me some of the weird things that had been going on around that area, because they were called out to an area on the Red River that everybody likes to call it Brown Springs. I don't know if you've heard about there or not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And one part of Brown Springs, you walk up the hill and there's this old cemetery.
Okay.
And he was an older Indian gentleman, so all he did is he called it the booger. He said, there's a booger out there. And I'd been fishing down there for years. We used to love to go fishing just down the hill from that cemetery, that first little turn in right there where you can look at the river. We used to fish there. And I'm like, there's nothing out there. I've been out there 100 times. And he said, yeah. He said, try walking up that hill sometime. And he said, there's a booger that lives behind and in and around that cemetery. And I told him he was crazy. I believed in Bigfoot, but I told him he was crazy because I'd been there so much. And I decided I was going to go down there, and I'm walking up that hill, and as I start to get towards the top of the hill, I start smelling this thing. And the smell that everybody talks about is what hit me first. And I don't even know if she was close when I smelled her or not. I know it was a she when I finally saw it, but it was bad. It was almost like rotten egg, wet dog, sulfur. It was terrible. It made me almost vomit. Worst thing I'd ever smelled in my life. And I'm like, maybe there's a dead animal or something up here, you know? And so I kept going, and I heard a scream. And I look off to my right, and trees are shaking. Like maybe something's, messing with the trees. Because there was no wind. And I'm like, well, that's odd. And I'm looking around at some of the tombstones, and I'm also looking at the ground trying to see if I can see any footprints, because he said there's the things out there all the time. And the next thing I know, something's thrown at me. And it was a rock, because I saw it when it landed. It was a pretty good size, about fish-size rock. And I don't think it was meaning to hit me, because it didn't hit me, but it landed just a few feet in front of me. And that's when I turn around, and she's standing there. This thing is standing there.
And is this in daylight?
Yeah, it was about 6:45 in the evening, honestly.
Oh, man.
In about the middle of August.
Man.
And she's standing there, and she's, and it's, I get a really good look at her, I mean, I'd say she's only about 30 feet away.
Holy
not far at all.
Cow.
And I did have a gun with me, but I did not even think about using it because I was, most of the reports at that time, nobody had any violent encounter reports. All the reports you got were that they were docile and peaceful and didn't want to hurt you,
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm standing there looking at this thing, and what really got me was she looked almost human, okay? Looking in her face, I mean, you could tell she wasn't human, but there was a spark of almost like humanity behind her eyes. Now, the eyes were the big, dark, brown, like everybody,
Mm-hmm.
like you're always hearing people say. And she had the little bit of the cone on top of her head. She was a reddish auburn color. And she wasn't very tall. She was only about a foot taller than I am, and I'm 6 foot tall. She was short for one, if from what they say.
Okay.
And I could tell that she did have the female breasts because they were very large and covered with hair, and you could tell they were female breasts. Except for like the nipple area didn't have any hair around it. I don't know why. It was just, I don't know why I even noticed that. It was just odd to me,
Mm-hmm.
And she stood there, and she stood there for just long enough for me to get a good look at her, and then she turned and walked away. Like she's
Wow.
like, oh well, whatever, he's just looking around, leave him alone, or
Right.
and I'm sitting there, and I don't know if I should be afraid or if I should be, enthralled in this, because I had, I've always wanted to see one, and when I saw this one, it was almost as if, God was telling me, hey, look, they're out here now,
Right.
And the very first thing is I left there and I drove over to Gainesville, Texas, and I told my dad. And my dad was like, no, you're crazy. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, I saw it. And he's like, why didn't you try to get a picture? And I'm like, I didn't have a camera. I was like, I just wanted to look and see if there was one there. I wasn't trying to get pictures or nothing like that. I wanted to see one for myself.
Right.
And I told him where I was at when I saw it. And he said, yeah, there's been legends down there for years about there being something there. And he said, there's all kinds of legends about ghosts and spooks and stuff down there too. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to do with this. And he said, man, hang on to it. It's a memory you'll always have. It's something you can share with your kids. And, maybe one of these days when they're finally proven to exist, you can say, hey, I saw one and this is where I saw it. And people won't think you're crazy anymore,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I went home that night and I didn't even tell my wife. I did not tell my wife because, I mean, she wasn't the type that when I told her I was going out looking for Bigfoot, she's like, oh, well, whatever,
Right.
I'll stay here and play with my Barbie dolls or do whatever. And I say that because she collected Barbie dolls. So,
Right. It fits the moment.
Exactly. So, but as I said, I wasn't afraid. So I kept going down to that area to go fishing. And then it got to where when I was down there fishing, I would pay attention to noises and sounds, and it got to where it was almost like I was seeing her every time I went fishing. To the
Hmm.
to the point there was a couple times I went out there camping out to camp out fishing, and when I say camping out, I was sleeping in the front of my truck, staying the night out there so I could fish the next day.
Okay.
That she'd wander down to where my truck was parked, and like she wanted, like she was trying to see me again, trying to figure out what I was. And the very last time I saw her was in 2009, before I moved away from this area. And I went down there, and this encounter is what gets to me the most, because it makes me think, it makes me believe they're more intelligent than what people think. Because as I was sitting there fishing, I felt something watching me, and I looked over my shoulder, and she was in the trees back off across the road watching me. And I got up to turn around to, look at her. And this time it was at dark, and I could barely see her, but I could tell it was her because of the smell.
Okay.
You always knew when she was around because it stunk.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, but that's the honest fact.
Sure.
And at that point, it seemed to me almost like she was trying to communicate with me, because she started grunting. Like, uh, uh, you know. And I'm not going to lie to you. I tried to communicate with her at that time. I pointed at myself and I said, "Tommy?" And she put her hand up like she was trying to point at me, and she said, And I said, "Tommy?" And she said, and then turned around and walked off.
Wow.
And that was the last time I saw her. I haven't been back down to that area since then. And it's not a fear thing. It's that just life got in the way and I couldn't go down there anymore. And that was about, I'd say, July of 2009.
July of 2009. And the first time you had when you saw her was in, did you say 2005?
2000, August of 2006.
2006. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And between 2006 and 2009, I'd seen her maybe 10 or 15 times.
Really?
Every time I went fishing down there, she'd come down like she was looking to see who was down there. And because I was paying attention, I was catching glimpses of her and seeing her. And, it got to where almost like we had learned to coexist. I'm like, I'm going to leave you alone, you leave me alone type situation.
Interesting.
And in October 2009, my dad, and my poor dad, my dad had gotten disabled too, really early in life. He was stuck in one of them electric mobility chairs. He couldn't walk. He was bad diabetic too, and and my dad loved to go fishing. And my dad was always after me, "Take me out there and let me see this Bigfoot. Take me out there and let me see this Bigfoot." And my dad was always talking about wanting to shoot one. And I didn't want her shot, because to me, she was not something to worry about.
Right.
So I wouldn't take him out to that spot. And I told him, I said, "If you go out there, you're going out there alone, because I'm not going out there with you if you're going out there to shoot her, because she's not harmful, And that was his primary thing. Was he said, "I want to go Bigfoot hunting. I want to kill a Bigfoot." And I didn't believe in killing him at the time. I'm sorry. I was like, "Look, from everything everybody says, they're not harmful. Do not kill this thing." So one night he said, "Let's go fishing." And I said, "We're not going to Brown Springs." And he said, "Okay." He said, "I've got another spot on the river that we'll go." Now, this is a few miles east on Red River. I can't tell you the exact name of the location, but if you're traveling down 82, Highway 82 headed towards Sherman from Gainesville, there's a little town called Oak Ridge. At one point, going down 82, there's a place where you can turn and go back off to the left, and it takes you back down to the river. Now, there's some houses down in that area, too. And you wouldn't think there'd be anything down in that area. But that's where we had the encounter where I had to actually fire shots at one. And that one scared me.
Oh, man.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah.
But my dad and I, and we were out there fishing, and it was late at night. And as I said, my dad's in one of these mobility chair things. Now, he's got enough to get up out of his chair and walk from the car to the chair, but he'd be in a chair. Okay?
Say that one more time, you cut out.
My dad was in one of them electronic mobility chairs.
Okay, sure.
Okay? He has enough physical ability, he did at the time, that he could walk from his chair to the car, from his, small places, but a lot of movement, he had to have his chair.
Gotcha.
So being out in the wild with him, I would automatically be handicapped because, one, he can't get around all that great. And I'm sure them chairs don't work all that well out in a forest-like setting.
No, they're not all terrain. They're meant for flat, level surfaces.
I had pulled the truck, and my dad is a huge man. My dad was 6'9".
Oh, okay? My gosh!
Yeah, my dad was huge. 6'9", weighed 375 pounds. He was not a little bitty boy at all.
Man.
So I had pulled the truck as close down to the river as I could, and the thing about it is where we were fishing, there is this large embankment that I know the embankment has to be, it's almost like a cliff-like thing there. You're way out over the river. And I'm like, Dad, there's no way we can fish from here. But he went ahead and put a pole in the water. He had one of them big poles that he just hung it out over the embankment and dropped it down, hit the thing, and the thing fell down into the water,
Okay.
And we're sitting there fishing, and it's dark, and I've got the truck kind of backed in because I've got some of them floodlights on the back of the truck that we can light the thing up with, that I've got an extra car battery in the back of the truck that, we could hook them to at the time. And I've got the truck backed in, and we're sitting there fishing, and the next thing I know is we hear a loud splash in the river.
Wow.
And coming from across the river, from the Oklahoma side of the river, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's her, and she sees me up here, and she wants to know why I'm here instead of, down yonder. And then I got to thinking, and I'm like, it's a good 4 or 5 miles from where we're at on the river to where she's at. Do they have that big of a range? I don't, because nobody knows how big their range is, or,
That's true.
And then we hear a growl. And the minute I hear the growl, I'm like, no, it's not her. It's not the same one. Because this one sounded bigger. Deep, low, just almost ungodly growl. Like nothing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, we've got wild dogs out here that don't even compare to this thing, okay, with their growl. And we've got some pretty big wild dogs out here. I won't lie. And when this thing growls, I look at my dad and I said, Dad, I think it's time to go. And he said, what is that? And I said, honestly, Dad, I don't know. I said, it could be a mountain lion. It could be anything, but I think it's time to go. So we start reeling in our fishing poles. And I do have a pistol with me because I'm a licensed peace officer. I carry a pistol everywhere I go,
Right.
And we hear some more splashes in the water. And I'm trying to hurry my dad along, and I hear another growl. And then whatever it was, well, I'm not going to say whatever it was. We know it was a Bigfoot. It hit that ledge, that cliff on the side we were on, down below us. And when it hit, I could hear dirt sliding down that cliff.
I'm sorry,
okay?
you cut out there.
When it hit that wall of underneath us.
Okay, so it hit it hit the side of that wall
cliff thing we were on.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when it hit, I heard dirt fall like
Oh,
down the
geez.
side of that cliff. And I don't
Oh,
know how this thing did it, but this thing started scaling that damn wall. Pardon my language. I'm sorry.
no, no, no. You
But
speak freely.
he started scaling that wall,
Holy cow.
and
You could hear it coming, climbing up.
and the whole time the heavy breathing, the snorting, and the stench, and the thing climbing the wall, and it was mad. It sounded like it was mad. And my dad's in the truck, and I'm worried about my dad. And my first thoughts is, we're in a little Ford Ranger. You know, my first thoughts is, I'm not going to be able to get away from this thing. It scared me. And that thing poked its head and chest up above the ledge.
Oh, my gosh.
And I was only about 10, 15 feet away.
Oh,
And
man. And you had
that
lights on
one,
it.
yeah, those lights were right on it. The lights were still on. I hadn't turned them off yet.
Man.
And I can't tell you how tall he was because he didn't make it to the top of the ledge. I made sure of that. But his head, my God, I mean, his head was at least 3 times the size of mine.
Oh, man.
His head was huge. And his shoulders were at least 3.5 to 4 foot wide.
Man.
This was no little bitty thing by any means.
Man.
And his eyes were glowing red. And I know everybody says that they're but his eyes were red in the eye shine. I think that's what scared me. And I know that a lot of people say that sometimes their eyes glow red, sometimes people say that's not true, but his eyes were glowing red.
And it wasn't necessarily a reflection as it was actually glowing red.
It may have been the reflection, as I said, because the lights were pointed right at him.
But it was it was pronounced enough that that's what you saw.
Yeah, it was pronounced enough that I saw red.
Oh, man.
And that's when I drew my pistol, because I knew even if I had tried to get back to the truck, he'd be on top of the cliff before I got to the truck.
Right.
And could get in and get it started. And I wasn't worried about myself. I was worried about my dad.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad is not in physical condition to fight for himself. So when this thing pulled itself up to try to, come up onto the cliff, when I got a good clear picture of its chest, I squeezed off 3 and put 3 in its chest.
Man.
And it screamed and fell off the cliff. Now, I don't know if I killed it. I never went back to see if I killed it. I never heard any reports of anybody finding the body of something out there. But I know they hit, and I know they impacted because in the light I saw the blood fly off of him.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did.
And what caliber pistol?
A .45 long Colt, 6-shot single action revolver.
Oh, wow. 45. Okay, yeah, that had some impact energy.
Yeah, I can't tell you what shells I was carrying. The brand I used to carry was Buffalo Bore.
Oh, yeah.
And they're a cowboy action load. And as I said, I was probably only about 10, 15 feet away from this thing when I unloaded 3 into his chest.
Man alive.
So, I mean, and I don't, as I said, I don't know if that killed it. I don't know if it just wounded it. I know it impacted and I saw blood fly. And I'll tell you right now, still to this day, 45 long Colt is my weapon of choice to carry when I'm out in the woods. Always has been. Because of the impact,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
yeah.
So, and and now that I think about it, I listen to y'all and I listen to Wiley Dave talk about it's got to be 30 caliber or bigger. And I don't know if my 45 is bigger than 30 cal, because I don't know much about rifles,
Yeah.
But I'm like, I know I did damage to this thing.
Sure. You said it right there. I mean, We don't know enough about its anatomical features, its internal anatomy, enough to know if that's sternum, right chest area, if it's if how thick it is. I mean, what will it stop? I've talked to people that's seen these things broadside, and they say they're 3 to 4 foot thick, the big ones, and so we don't know if the heart placement or the lung placement is exactly that of the human. I mean, we can only speculate, but
Yeah.
that close of range, 10 to 15 with a 45, man, that's a lot of it, especially three of them right in the same vicinity or close there too. That a human would never survive that. I could tell you that right now. Not that at
A
range.
human wouldn't survive one at that distance. I
No.
know that for a fact.
Yeah, absolutely. That is correct. No doubt. But
I mean,
did you hear it fall off the back? I mean, after the three?
I heard the splash in the river.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did.
How far on that cliff was he? Was he pushing himself up like someone would be pushing out of a pool, a human would? How far up? Was it waist up?
As I said, no. His, at the most, maybe just below of where his chest would have been. Just enough to where I could hit him where everybody says the heart would be on a human.
Okay.
I'd say just below where maybe the male's version of a breast would be, is where the top of the cliff was as he had raised up.
Man. So you heard the splash.
I heard the splash.
And what did your dad witness this, or was he facing the opposite direction in the truck?
My dad, the funny thing about it is my dad, he still wasn't sure that we were in any danger. He was sitting on his side of the truck, on the passenger side of the truck, with the truck door open, with his feet still on the ground, leaning out, looking at me, trying to ask me what the hell's going on. So he saw it.
Oh, he did.
It scared him to death. Because after I shot the thing, that's when he decided that he was ready to go.
Yeah.
That was the quickest I'd ever seen that man move in my life, because in the time it took me to holster that gun, he was turned around with the door shut, and he'd even reached over and turned on the ignition for me.
Wow.
He was ready to go. And I didn't waste no time either, especially getting to the truck. I wanted gone in case I didn't kill that thing,
Mm-hmm.
Because when I saw it, I was like, this ain't gonna kill it. This ain't gonna kill it. All I can do is slow it down.
Right.
And if I don't slow it down enough, me and Dad ain't gonna make it out of here alive.
I mean,
I could tell by the way it was acting, it wanted to get us.
Oh, really? That's what I was going to ask. Is that it had purpose and intent?
Yeah, it was coming, and it was coming. It was pissed off, and I don't know what it would have done if it had got us, but I could tell it was pissed. The growling and the heavy breathing and just the way the way it sounded as it was coming up that cliff. I had never heard the other one sound that way. Okay, never in my life. And I'd seen her several times, and she had never made noises like this one was making.
Man,
I don't know what it is about the difference. Now, I will tell you his coloration, because as I said, I could see it in the line.
Mm-hmm.
He was a dark brown, whereas she was an auburn color. He was a dark brown. I don't know if there's a difference in coloration as to how they act, or what it is between. And I'm only guessing he was a male. I mean, I couldn't tell if he had breasts, but at that point, I wasn't worried about whether he was male or female. I was worried about getting out of there alive.
Right. My word.
I will tell you this, and this is, I don't know who my father told. I have suspicions about who my father told, but I don't know who my father told. I know 2 weeks later, the place I was working for a prison that is in Texas. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called
that
time.
I have not.
At that time, I was working there. I had transferred over there because the pay was better and it would help me get a job in law enforcement. I went into work, and the superintendent of that facility calls me in and says, I got some people here that need to talk to you.
Oh.
And I go into their conference room, and in the conference room, there's a superintendent of that facility. There is a Texas Ranger. There is a fishing game man. And there are 2 other men in suits.
In suits?
In suits. Look like FBI types.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, you saw. Your dad's been talking. We want to know what you saw. And I told them everything.
Who asked that question?
The fishing game did.
The fishing game did. The guys in the suits, did they say anything?
No, they never said nothing.
But so the people that were in the room was 2 fishing game?
A Texas Ranger, a fishing game, the superintendent of that facility, and 2 guys in suits.
This was a closed room, and you told them everything.
Mm-hmm. And they had a tape recorder on the table.
Oh, they did?
Yes, they did. And the fishing game guy said, look, we know your dad's been talking. We want to know what y'all saw. We want to know what happened. And I told them what I saw. And I told them what road we took to get down in there. Which, I mean, I could take people out to that road today to show them where that's at, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, the Texas Ranger says, you are never allowed to speak to this again. He said, I am going to trust you with some information that because you have a law enforcement license, you need to know. He said, we know these things are out there. We know sometimes it gets violent. You are never to tell anybody else again. He said, if you tell somebody and we find out, you will lose your license.
And this was the Texas Ranger.
This was the Texas Ranger.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, in the state of Texas, I mean, hell, I mean, everybody listens to Texas Rangers, you know.
Right.
And I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, why were you out there? And I'm like, I was fishing. He's like, did you go out there intending to kill one of these things? And I said, no. I said, that's not why I go out. And he said, what do you mean, why you go out? So I told him about seeing the other one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was honest and forthcoming. And he said, so you just wanted to see it for yourself? And I said, yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, who isn't?
And, you know, he said, did you take any pictures? And I said, sir, when I was working for WinStar don't pay all that much. My phone didn't have a camera on it. I had a little bitty, all you could do is make phone calls, you know? And when WinStar first opened, hell, that was when we were just now learning how to text, you know?
Right.
So,
right. Very primitive.
Yeah. And he said, what about this encounter with your dad? And I said, sir, there wasn't time to take pictures. I said, I have a Motorola Razr, and it'll take pictures, but there wasn't time to take pictures. He said, I'm going to go out there where you were at and look around. And I said, okay, you know, you want me to go with you? I'll show you where it's at, you know? And he's like, no, we're going to go out there and take a look. I never heard anything else about it.
What did those FBI types, those guys in suits, what did they say? Or how did they look? Their demeanor, their body posture?
You could tell one of them, when I talked about it, was shocked. It was almost like this was the first time he'd ever heard any of this before. The other one was very stone cold. Never said a word. stared at me the whole time. And I mean, if looks could kill, I'd have been dead type stare. Very uncomfortable in that room. And those two FBI guys, sorry, one of them was, he was really tall and lanky. I mean, he didn't look like he should be an FBI guy. He did not look like he should work for the government. I mean, really tall, real skinny, just a string bean. I mean, I could have broke him in half like a stick. But the other one, the one that stared at me and stared me down, was a good 6'4", 230 pounds. He looked huge. He looked like a wrestler. And, he was more the type that he almost sounds to me like one of the types that y'all normally describe, but he did not have a beard.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like there for a while, the guy that we got a name of him. Believe it or not, he was a civilian, and he did contract work. His dad did contract work, we found out. But he just kind of looked like a rough biker dude, was never in a suit, though.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been him, maybe shaven and different attire. But these guys in these suits, they're in a federal program, so they go by agents, or, we collectively just generically call them the MIB, because we think it's a multitude of different agencies that they represent, and it is a group of military, we think, predominantly, but I think it's a group of the NSA, CIA, some bureau people, some active military, like some of like Delta Force, Navy SEAL, those kind of guys that are on a semi-retirement, and then we think there is some civilians that are contracted too. But these,
I believe it, and it's
you got to witness it firsthand right there. A number of things. Not only did you find out that local law enforcement, state law enforcement know about these things, but then that they know that a federal agency also is working to know about these things. Because they were right there. So
yeah,
you got through.
They were all in this room together.
So when you got through and you told your story, what happened next?
It said they told me never talk about it again, and if I ever spoke of it again, I'd lose my license. And they sent me to the unit to go to work, and they left. About a week later, I was called into the superintendent's office again and was told that I was being laid off. Not fired, but laid off, that I was going to be caught in a state layoff. Which at the time, the prison did lay a bunch of people off, but before this incident, I'd been told I had enough tenure that I would not be caught up in the layoff. And then suddenly that changes. And I think this had something to do with it. I really do.
Yeah, what we're finding out is that they do this to a number of reasons, I think. I think they do this to show what kind of power they have. They have power over you and your future. I think that's one thing. So it's like a and I think another thing too is they try to get people, and this has happened numerous times. How many times I cannot, both you and I will never know. And that is numerous. I believe it's in the thousands of people have lost their jobs, their career, their homes, everything over these guys. And that's why I say they're not your friend. They couldn't care less about who you are, what you do, how much you make, and if you lose everything. They don't care. They're going to get up the next morning, have some coffee, and have a donut, and go back to work. Another person.
Yeah, and that's the way they made it feel. And that was in late 2009. Well, in 2010, I moved down to the area. And it was due to a love interest. I moved down there to try to build a life. Couldn't find work around there at all. I mean, nobody around there would hire me. Nobody. And I thought that kept popping up too because of this.
That's very possible.
And
That's very possible.
I went until the middle of 2011 without a job. And then in 2011, and I'm not allowed to give the name of the place because the place that hired me told me that they were doing so even though they'd been told not to. And he said, you know, if you talk about the, and I'm still in contact with the gentleman that hired me to this day.
So let me get this straight for a second. So this place, and yeah, that's fine.
It was a small town in Texas hired me on to be a deputy.
Okay, so they hired you to be in law enforcement, and they told you that they were told not to hire you.
Exactly.
And so they had been following you. They had been watching you. Somebody's been doing some surveillance on you.
Well, they were. As far as I know, they don't know more. But the man who hired me, he said, "Look," he said, "I'm going to take a chance on you because you seem like a straight up guy." He said, I was told not to hire you, but I'm going to." And he looked at me at that point in time and he said, "Though I'm going to tell you this, if you ever talk about your encounter," and he mentioned my encounter.
He did?
Yeah. He said, "If you ever talk about your encounter, don't ever tell anybody where you went to work at. Do not ever mention my name. Do not ever bring up the name of our town." He said, "I don't want to get myself in trouble for taking a chance on a young kid that I think deserves a chance." That's exactly what he said.
I'm surprised that someone divulged the encounter to him rather than just saying, "This guy, you don't want him, he's bad news, yada, yada, don't hire him," or whatever, that they told him about this encounter.
Well, the thing of it is, and I think I know why they told him the encounter. This little town is out in the Texas. And there's lots of reports of the Texas people seeing these things. I think they wanted me somewhere where there's been lots of encounters with these things.
Oh, gotcha.
So that if I talked about seeing one again, everybody would be like, "Well, yeah, everybody sees them around here."
Okay. Okay.
It doesn't sound, and in that little town, there's people that talk about seeing them, people that talk about having reports with them, people that talk about it openly and publicly. It's crazy. I never, the little lady in the grocery store, "I saw the booger last night," and I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for people to talk about it right in the public and other people are going, "Yeah, well, I saw one too." That's strange. Very surreal.
And that is where I had my very last encounter. And that one, I don't think I'll ever forget it. I still have nightmares about it. I don't know what I saw in that one. I think what I saw in that one may have been what y'all call a Dogman.
Oh, wow.